Well, Steve goes on to say that Paul's fainting was always quite convenient in the sense Paul always used to manage to faint onto a sofa or a big mound of feathers rather than flat on his face. Hello, and welcome to Maiden Voyages, a podcast series devoted to exploring the peerless discography of the world's greatest heavy metal band. It is, of course, Iron Maiden. Across this series, we'll be journeying through the band's entire discography, discussing, analysing, dissecting, celebrating, and possibly commiserating, not today though, every single Iron Maiden record. This episode, we rewind the clock to 1982 to explore Iron Maiden's game-changing third album, Number of the Beast. But first, let's introduce ourselves. I'm Blev, an historian of sorts and an Iron Maiden addict. Yeah.
Addict?
Yeah,
Wow.
addicted.
That's a dark turn.
I am an Iron Maidenologist, an expert in the studies of Maiden. And joining me today is, joining me always.
Always, yeah. I am like a bad smell. I am Sam. That's apparently my introduction. I am a writer of sorts, and I'm not addicted to Iron Maiden.
I'm not there yet. I can't let go,
No.
Sam. I can't let go. It's got its hooks in me. So, Number of the Beast. Shall we?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it? Spoiler.
Yeah. That's it. That's this episode done.
It's pretty good. Shall we talk about when we first heard this album?
Ooh, yeah.
Do you remember?
No, not entirely. Obviously, my intro to Iron Maiden probably would have been through, it was through Run to the Hills and Number of the Beast. It was around the time that Dance of Death came out, so it would have been 2003 or 2004.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I was a bit late to the bandwagon even after Dance of Death came out. And then, Number of the Beast was the first album I picked up after having picked up only the No More Lies EP. That was my first Maiden purchase.
That is such a bizarre entry route into the world of Iron
It was because
Maiden.
I wanted the sweatband.
It's a good sweatband.
That came in the
Yeah.
little box for No More Lies. And then I picked up Number of the Beast, must have been like a month or two afterwards. And I mean, it was just sort of instantaneously like, this is the Iron Maiden album.
So essentially, Number of the Beast is the first full-length Iron Maiden album you heard.
Yes.
Same here.
Ah.
Same here. I'm going to tell a story now. It's not particularly interesting. I'm going to set it up, but I'm going to tell it once.
Well,
okay?
you sold me.
So strap in for the not particularly interesting story. But my introduction to Iron Maiden was a mutual friend of ours burnt me a CDR back in the day, because that's what we did. We're the CDR generation.
The Spice Girls generation.
Or as I like to call it, Generation CDR.
Sure, okay.
And he illegally, I'm probably fine now, burnt me a CDR of a compilation called Greatest Air Guitar Anthems Volume 2.
Oh, okay. I remember that being advertised on telly.
It was
so
advertised a lot.
Yeah.
And it was like endorsed by Brian May. That was the marketing ploy.
Is that the compilation that literally had Run to the Hills in the advert?
Yeah, quite possibly.
Yeah. Because I actually have like very strong memories of seeing that trailer and just hearing the Run to the Hills bit and being like, that sounds fun.
See, I remember it's marketed a lot, but I don't remember hearing that. But I do remember getting it and receiving it in that way, where someone gives you a present and you're like, oh, thanks. But I was a bit like...
None of you can see this, but Blevin is doing a very dismayed grimace whilst he says that.
Great. Because even at the age of 13, I thought I was a bit of a 70s hard rock aficionado. A bit of a music snob, basically. So I thought, oh, great, it's All Right Now by Free. Whereas I'm like, nah, mate, I'm listening to like 3 bootlegs from the Isle of Wight in 1970. So, I don't really need to hear...
I don't need this mainstream stuff.
I don't need to hear Paranoid by Black Sabbath again when, Sabotage is so much better. God.
Yeah.
But I had it on just in the background, and it's like, yeah, okay, stuff I know, Black Knight, Deep Purple, whatever. And then Run to the Hills came on, and I don't have many of these, but those genuine moments where you're like, oh my God, really instantaneous, like hairs on the back of your neck, like... And I couldn't believe it was Iron Maiden, because I had an image in my head of what Iron Maiden were, and in my head I thought they sounded like Deicide.
Yeah, but
because of the artwork and everything, I thought Iron Maiden must be really scary, shouty metal.
For everyone else, obviously I know this very well. At the time, Blevin and I would would have been like 13, 14, and that's around the time we became friends. When we became friends, Blevin was very afraid of metal in general.
Yeah.
In that, like, he was very well versed in 70s rock, but he thought Metallica was like just gonna be at the gates level heavy.
But not even afraid. It was really condescending in that elitist.
Yeah, true. You were definitely a bit snobby.
Yeah,
I was like, no, I'm not going to listen to Metallica.
I basically thought metal was music for thick people, right? It's what I thought. And the irony of me now sitting
and then
here,
I lent you Master of Puppets.
yeah, and I said, okay. One of two things is happening here. Either metal's good or I'm really thick. So I
A
decided...
little bit of column A, a little bit of column B.
Column B. But yeah, having heard Run to the Hills, I mean, that was it for me. I was hooked, and obviously I bought the album that was off, Number of the Beast. And yeah, that's when I became an addict.
This entire episode has already taken a really weird AA tone.
I didn't know it at the time.
I'm not that happy with.
That was the start of the end of my life.
Oh, lordy.
But yeah, both our first Maiden albums.
Yeah, which makes sense. It is
Yeah.
often touted as like the definitive Iron Maiden album.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we go on to discuss it, have we got some fact checks or Pedant's Corner, as I would like to rebrand this?
Pedant's Corner. That is the perfect rebranding. I am okay with that. So, we've got the fact checked for episode 3, which will be 2 episodes before this, because that's the cadence I'm working to. Don't question me. So, the first thing I wanted to check out was you mentioned in episode 3, we were talking about Maiden's producer, Martin Birch, and you mentioned that you had it on relatively good authority that Metallica had explored having Martin Birch to produce an album.
Yeah.
Couldn't figure out what album it was. So I couldn't figure out what album it was because none of my research shows they had a particular album in mind. But I found an online log of a Metallica fan club Q&A session from 1996.
That's deep.
Yeah, I know. I was searching Google for quite a while, to be honest. And the whole thing's charming because it's like very 90s internet chat logs. But someone sends a question into Lars. Have you ever considered working with engineer-producer Martin Birch? And then Lars replies, should I do a Lars voice? I'm not going to do a Lars voice.
Yeah, you need like that anchor phrase, don't you? Like, that riff's so stark.
Stark!
Ah, God, hey.
Definitely was interested in Birch. I'm not doing that anymore. Definitely was interested in Birch in the early years when he was making all those Iron Maiden records, but the relationship with Flemming Rasmussen was too strong to break. So it's got to be Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets. One of those two would have been when they were considering Birch.
Interesting. Yeah, well, I'm sure the version I heard is Martin Birch said he actually turned Metallica down. It's a little bit opaque, isn't it? And I'm not, saying he was approached by Metallica, whether it was a middleman kind of potentially sounding him out rather than approach, but interesting. Wow.
Yeah. So my original assertion that it would have been around Justice, very wrong.
Okay, yeah.
The second thing for Pedant's Corner was how big was the marquee in London? In
Soho?
Yeah. Because we were talking about Maiden playing 7 nights there or something. So it's bigger than I expected. It held around 700 people, but by many accounts, it often had much more, and it was just packed to the rafters. Which, health and safety hazard, but it's the 80s.
So we're still... I was about to embarrass myself by doing on the spot maths. We're still looking at somewhere in the region of...
Probably around 5,000 people
saw
Iron Maiden that month, if we're assuming that they went over the capacity of 700.
So basically, if you're scaling this to modern day London venues, they could have done a night at Brixton.
Yeah.
Not bad for your second album.
No, not bad at all. Then the next thing I had was, so this isn't really a fact check, but I tried to see if there were any bits of footage or photographs of Steve Harris doing the vocal set in Grimsby.
Oh, yeah.
When Paul Di'Anno didn't show up. As you said, there doesn't really seem to be any footage available, but I did find a bit more info. And it sounds like, from some accounts, it was a mostly instrumental set. So it's slightly less cool and hilarious than we thought it was.
That sounds a bit
Steve
rubbish.
sung some songs.
Okay.
But yeah, they also just didn't always have vocals.
Okay.
Which makes more sense in that, and no offense to Steve Harris, but I just suspect firstly, he's not known for being a singer, let alone someone who can sing and play quite complicated bass lines at the same time.
So it was like post-rock Iron Maiden.
Yeah, something like that. Then, this was a very random fact check, but you mentioned Chris Tangarides.
Yeah.
You mentioned he produced a King Diamond album, but you weren't sure which one. You said maybe The Eye.
Yeah.
It was actually Conspiracy.
Was it now?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
where he is credited as guitar solos producer and mixing rather than actual producer.
Ah, okay.
King Diamond gets the producer credit, which is weird.
I mean, yeah, if you've got Chris Sangarides on board.
He just produced the guitar solos and did the
Right.
mixing, which is a weird distinction. Yeah, I only know Sleepless Nights off that album.
Oh, it's good.
Sleepless Nights is a good song.
I
I
would
should check it out at some point.
This is a bit of a tangent, but I'd say it might be my second favourite King Diamond album.
Ooh. Cool. Then the final bit for Penance Corner was obviously we were talking about the Killers artwork and the Easter eggs hidden within it.
Yeah.
We realised that on the CD version of the artwork, it didn't have half those Easter eggs, which was a shame. So I looked at a vinyl version of it versus the CD version of it. The artwork on the CD remaster from the 90s is cropped in a way that it cuts out the Ruskin arms.
It's zoomed in, isn't it? Yeah, it's like
it's only just the bottom layer. So the Ruskin Arms is gone, Charlotte in a sex shop is gone, and yeah, it's I don't know if they did that out of copyright concerns or what have you, but it's marginally different.
Well, thanks, Sam. Are you ready for a quiz?
I'm never ready for the quiz,
Yay!
but I'll bloody do it.
Right, and it's a double bonus quiz for part 1 and part 2 this week.
Okay.
So I'll give you the part 1 quiz now.
Yeah.
Then we'll return to part 2. So
I can barely contain my excitement.
we're going for 5 questions in total. Okay, so I'll hit you up for the
So
first.
you're going to do 2.5 now?
Yeah, no, that's the thing. It's slightly. Yeah, I know. It lacks symmetry, but I couldn't find a 6th question that was good enough. All right.
There we go. There's the truth.
So we'll do 3. Then you can have 2.
Okay.
So question 1. Iron Maiden play their first concert with Bruce Dickinson at the Rainbow. Let me rephrase that. Iron Maiden play their first concert. I didn't do this in a rush. Iron Maiden play their first UK concert with Bruce Dickinson at the Rainbow at the end of 1981. They debut 2 songs off their forthcoming album. What are they?
Ooh. I could just name 2 random songs off the album.
That is
I guess
basically
that's
the
what I'm
question,
gonna do.
isn't it?
Yeah, okay. The Prisoner?
Nope.
Number of the Beast?
No.
Wow,
It was.
swing and a miss.
It was 22 Acacia Avenue and Children of the Damned.
Okay, then.
Question 2.
That was a rubbish question.
It was quite... I just thought...
I want you to put more time into this quiz, Blevin.
But the whole point of the quiz is just thinking of questions you almost certainly can't get right.
Great. Well, that's reassuring.
Well, having said that, this next one, I'd say you've got about a 1 in 3 chance of getting this right.
Oh, joy.
Iron Maiden's last concert of Paul Di'Anno took place in Denmark in 1981. But which famous musician was in the audience?
Can I get a clue?
The clue's in the question. It was in Denmark.
King Diamond.
It was literally the other Danish metal musician.
Joey Tempest?
You've already mentioned him once.
Oh, Lars.
Yes, Lars Ulrich. That's why
There are many Danish musicians. You got the members of DAD, everyone else in Merciful
It's
Fate.
obviously... Sorry, if it's one of the members of DAD, I wouldn't have said which famous musician.
Ooh, that's not fair. They're very famous in mainland Europe.
That's why I said you had a 1 in 3 chance, because there are literally 3 Danish metal musicians. I thought was he going to say King Diamond?
Wow.
I thought
You heard it here first. Blevin hates Denmark.
There's stuff that I've got no strong opinions about Denmark either way. Just, not...
Well, I think after this, Denmark will have strong opinions about you.
Sorry, Denmark. I love Lars Ulrich and Merciful Fate, King Diamond, and I was going to say Golden Earring, but I think they're from Holland. Sorry.
Well, you're just digging
Oh
further.
dear, sorry. And final question. I'm just going to say, if you didn't get that one right, you've got no hope here.
Yay.
Before auditioning, but it's an interesting question. Before auditioning Bruce Dickinson as Paul's replacement, the band auditioned another singer. Who?
Can I have a clue?
I mean, even if I gave you a clue, I still don't think you'd get it.
So you're not going to give me a clue?
Well, what can I say? He played with Paul Kossoff, the former guitar player of Free.
Paul Rogers?
No, well,
Iron Maiden plus Paul Rogers.
Paul Rogers.
I've got nothing.
It's a chap called Terry Slessor. Okay. Now, Terry Slessor, wait for it, because I said it's interesting. It's not interesting yet. It gets interesting. Terry Slessor was in Paul Kossoff's post-free band, Backstreet Crawler. Paul Kossoff died very young of a drugs overdose, the sort of guitar virtuoso of Free.
Yeah.
But Backstreet Crawler carried on, and I think they changed their name to Crawler, but, known as after Paul Kossoff was dead, that was the main star attraction. But before he was in Backstreet Crawler, Terry Slessor was in a prog band from Newcastle called Beckett. Dun, dun, dun.
Okay, fine.
More to be revealed later. Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, let's not say anything more about that now. So yeah, Terry Slessor, formerly of Beckett, latterly of Backstreet Crawler and Crawler, was actually auditioned, but Maiden decided his voice was a bit too... I mean, he's a really good singer. Like, I actually know Backstreet Crawler, liking Free and Paul Kossoff, but he's got very bluesy, gravelly type voice, and they said that.
I mean, that's the knowledge of nerdy 13-year-old Blevin only listening to 70s rock,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Big on Backstreet Crawler. Another Maiden fact, before we get on. Last one, because it is Backstreet... Paul Kossoff's first studio album was called Backstreet Crawler. He's pictured on the front of it with a black Stratocaster. That black Stratocaster came into the possession of Dave Murray. Like, as a young man, he tracked it down, matching the number. It was for sale second hand.
How do you know this?
Well, it's just a bit of, and Dave Murray, a big Paul Kossoff fan as well. So Paul Kossoff, of course, usually played Les Paul, but on the Backstreet Crawler album, he has a Strat. Of course, yeah. But yeah, Dave, and I believe that is the black Strat you see Dave play in a lot of the early Iron Maiden stuff. Used to belong to Paul Kossoff.
Well, if I was worried if this podcast was boring before, I'm certain of it now.
I think it's important to cut the wheat from the chaff at the start. It's like if you think that's boring, leave now, right? Because it's not going to get any better. This is what
it's all downhill from here.
It's all nerdy Maiden trivia.
Oh, Lord. Okay. Well, 0 out of 3. Go me.
Yeah, it's okay. You've got a chance to redeem yourself in the second part.
Have I?
We'll see. So, shall we go into the background before picking up where we left off?
Yeah. So, Killers is released. They're supporting it. Iron Maiden seem to be on quite a good sort of upward swing.
Yeah. Despite the lukewarm reviews it got in the UK, they go on a massive tour in support of Killers, their biggest tour to date. 8 months, 126 shows. Also takes them to lots of new territories. So, obviously, obligatory UK tour. Back to Europe, this time as headliners rather than support. They headline everywhere on this tour except in the USA. So they go to Japan for the first time.
Cool.
Australia. They're touring a big North American tour, supporting... Any guesses who they're supporting in North America?
Kiss, again.
No. They've supported them before, though. Judas Priest.
Oh.
So they're opening...
I was assuming an American band.
Yeah, no, well, Priest were, I think, a bigger draw in the States than the Maiden were. So,
fair enough.
Yeah, they support Judas Priest and UFO. And the UK tour concludes with a headline show at the Hammersmith Odeon. So again, they're climbing that venue ladder, aren't they? From Ruskin Arms to Rainbow to Marquee to Hammersmith Odeon. So on the surface, the picture seems very positive.
Yeah.
But again, it's Paul's vocal issues, in quote marks, that are the fly in the ointment here, particularly in Europe.
Right.
So... From all accounts, indeed including Paul, he carries on living this quite hedonistic lifestyle, drugs, particularly speed and coke, smoking like a chimney, doesn't ever seem to sleep, drinks a lot, and naturally this has an effect on his voice. And it culminates with the band cancelling 5 dates in Germany. And how do you imagine Steve Harris felt about that?
Not that happy.
Quite cross. Yeah, quite cross. Yeah, not happy about that at all. But interestingly, talking about it now, Steve seems to suggest that he'd always harboured doubts about Paul's commitment to the band. But he says that...
But is that just retrospective?
It's quite possible.
Hindsight narrative shaping. I mean, particularly if you look at modern Iron Maiden, they've done so much work to mythologize and reshape the narrative around their sort of ascent to greatness. And I don't judge them for that, but they've streamlined a lot of things.
Yeah, and that's absolutely possible. But if we take Steve at his word, he says he'd always harboured doubts about Paul's commitment, but he sort of clinged on to the hope that as the band became a more viable proposition, not just as a band, but as actually like a job, right?
Yeah,
This is,
yeah.
and a good job at that. He hoped.
It's career level band.
Yeah,
already.
and they were Killers. They were, this was like a legitimate career. But Steve says, but if anything, the bigger we got, the worse he, i.e. Paul, got. Steve says he'd come off stage some nights and pretend to collapse unconscious. He was always fainting.
I mean, it also just sounds like he had some issues. Maybe he wasn't pretending, Steve.
Well, Steve goes on to say that Paul's fainting was always quite convenient in the sense Paul always used to manage to faint onto a sofa or a big mound of feathers rather than flat on his face and like knock himself out.
Oh no, I fainted into bed.
But it seems that certainly that run of, if Steve did indeed harbour doubts, it was those cancelling of those 5 German dates that were the final straw. He doesn't confront Paul about it at the time, but it seems a consensus was emerging that, right, Paul's got to go now. And, even Rod Smallwood has a theory I think it's worth exploring.
Okay.
He says Paul was scared of success and responsibility. I don't know about you, but it seems a lot of Paul Di'Anno's behaviour, he was almost kind of self-sabotaging, wasn't he?
Yeah, and I mean, neither of us have any remit to be psychologists.
Oh, of course, yeah, pure speculation. I mean...
But there's a bit of a trope of people reaching a certain level of fame and the pressure that comes with that and a desire to sort of self-sabotage it in order to, cope with it.
Yeah, it's like if you're in a relationship with someone and you don't quite have the maturity to deal with it square on, you will just start acting like a prick, basically, in the hope that they will.
I mean, speak for yourself, Black.
Yeah.
We all know your history.
So I've heard. This is, some people, God knows who, would do that. but it's interesting that Paul, well, again, this is all retrospective, but Paul said afterwards, he said, when he saw the tour dates for Killers, he said, I knew I'd never last the whole of the tour. It was too much. I do have a theory that Paul Di'Anno was never happier than when he was playing the Ruskin Arms, low stakes, low pressure, adoration, people buying him a pint afterwards, probably getting into a fight, like pulling a girl. Like I sort of feel that's what he wanted from being in a band. And all of a sudden, it's like you've got 100+ tour dates. There's a lot of pressure and money riding on it. And he just didn't want that. I don't think he wanted, and also, consecutive nights of touring. I think he wanted to have a laugh. Really, I think
which is totally fair.
Yeah, it's absolutely fine. I don't think he was expecting it necessarily, that this is what he was getting into. And
it also tracks with a bit of an ideological difference between Paul and Steve that I think through us talking about it and through like looking at more clips, there's obviously Steve Harris is incredibly driven and just has like this huge vision for what Iron Maiden should be, and he's kind of had that since day one. And I think your assertion that Paul Di'Anno is kind of like, he wants to be a club touring band and he wants to go out and have a laugh. And I think also, like in the earlier episodes, we covered a lot about how much Steve Harris hates punk. Whereas if you look at a lot of Paul Di'Anno clips from the last decade, Paul Di'Anno will always refer to those 2 Iron Maiden albums he was on as punk albums. And like he's vehement about it. Like in fact, I've ended up watching a lot of Paul Di'Anno clips because I hate myself.
God, yeah. What a life.
Yeah, I know. I judge me too. But just listen to Paul here.
This is real punk, man. This is what made Iron Maiden. Not the money-making machine.
So, yeah.
Not the money-making machine as well.
It's quite a weird dig at Iron Maiden. This is real punk. This is what made Iron Maiden, not the money-making machine. And I'm sure, I mean, to be honest, this is like 2012, and Paul is drunk, very drunk, and in the middle of a fight with a crowd member who's heckling him. So, not like the words he would want to be quoted by. But there is an interesting ideological difference in that early Iron Maiden is a much more punkier DIY outfit.
Yeah.
And I guess this tour, the Killers tour, is where that starts coming to a head.
Yes. It's a shame, because the one thing, I've got some quotes from Paul Di'Anno here, and he comes across much better, because I was about to say Paul's always been very gracious about the split for the most part, maybe when he's just not hammered. Because he said...
Yeah, because I've seen other clips from him, and he's actually very like reasonable and down to earth. that entire clip is a bad time. He makes a lot of homophobic comments.
Yeah. I mean,
it's a real YouTube hole just following his very, very poor opinions.
Yeah. Because, certainly he's also said, direct quote from Paul, and basically at the end of the tour, Rod Smallwood calls him into the band's office. Apparently the rest of the band were meant to be there but didn't show up, which is a little bit...
That is shitty.
That is quite, bad. But anyway, Paul says, I was relieved, and also then puts in that caveat, I was going to quit the following day, which I think is quite... It's convenient, isn't it?
Sure you were, buddy.
But I do believe he was relieved.
Yeah. I think that's
I
totally
do
valid.
believe that. And, he's also said that he knew that he couldn't give, these are his words now, I couldn't give 100% to Maiden anymore, and it wasn't fair to the band, the fans, or to myself. That bit, what he's saying there, he's trying to make it out as some kind of ideological difference, that he didn't like the sort of money-making machine Maiden's going into. I think that's rubbish. I don't think there was any...
That clip is 2012 and reeks of sour grapes.
Yeah,
right?
it does, right? And to be fair, he's not usually like that. I just think he couldn't hack the pressure. It stopped seeming like fun. He knew he'd have to sober up and start behaving, and that wasn't what he wanted out of it. I think he liked getting hammered and getting high and not going to sleep and being with different women every night. I think that's what he wanted. And when he realised, that's not what I've signed up for, he lost interest.
Iron Maiden's resident bad boy, Paul, gets fired by Rod Smallwood without any of the band there, which is a pretty rubbish move.
Yeah.
Like,
it's not great.
That doesn't reflect well on the band. How does Bruce come into the fold?
Well,
that's all that really matters here.
Well, indeed, yeah. At this point, enter Bruce, nay Paul Bruce Dickinson.
Is that his name?
He's another
Paul.
He's another Paul, yeah. Okay. So I kind of can forgive him for maybe dropping the Paul bit just for the sake of ease.
Yeah.
You can't have two Pauls. And also, Paul Dickinson, that does just sound like like a solicitor or a...
I mean, Bruce Dickinson doesn't sound that much better. It sounds like a Shakespearean boxer.
Well, that's it. But that's better than being a solicitor, isn't it? Bruce is a sort of inherently silly name. but we'll go into Bruce in a minute. But
okay.
Obviously, Bruce Dickinson does end up joining the band, and we'll get to how he gets there. But I thought it might be worth discussing changing your singer, the perils and opportunities for bands, because most times it does not work.
I don't think that's entirely true.
Okay, go on.
End discussion.
You're wrong.
Next. No, okay, so I don't know why I always use them as the example, but Halloween, right? Original singer, Kai Hansen, serviceable singer at that time, but also maybe not the world's greatest singer, gets replaced by Michael Kiske.
Yeah.
The world's greatest singer.
Yeah.
I'm going to die on that hill. So that's a fantastic change.
Yeah, then replaced by Andy Derris.
Which is also a fantastic change, but in a very different context.
But commercially treading water.
Well, no. The difference is, like, with Michael Kiske, they released Chameleon tanks. Master of the Rings comes out with Andy Derris. Metal's irrelevant in the mid-90s anyway, so that's the context. But Master of the Rings it sort of revitalizes Halloween's career as actually a functioning metal band, whereas Chameleon... As much as I oddly love Chameleon was not a great creative or commercial release.
It certainly wasn't a great commercial release, no. Okay, let me give you a few other options, okay? Gary Cherone joining Van Halen. Ian Gillan joining Black Sabbath.
Right.
What's-his-face joining Motley Crue.
Go back to Van Halen, though. You've skipped out a singer change, right? Sammy Hagar replacing David Lee Roth. Very different styles, but Sammy Hagar is fantastic. 5150 is an incredible album, and you're doing yourself a disservice not listening to it.
Can we say then it can go one of two ways?
Yes, we can say that different things can happen with different singers.
Yeah.
Of course we can say that.
But nonetheless,
that is not taking a stance.
It's a risk, right? And sometimes
it's a risk, and it's an opportunity.
Yeah, sometimes it massively pays off, and sometimes it can basically kill a band's career.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I mean, let's be fair. Gary Cherone didn't kill Van Halen 3. Like, that album's just not great. And also, Gary Cherone clearly wasn't quite the right fit.
Yeah.
But Gary Cherone is a fantastic vocalist.
Oh, yeah. And
has the right sort of, I guess, like, enigmatic flamboyancy to front Van Halen. It's just, it was also the late 90s and metal was dead.
But
especially in America.
But I have a theory about Bruce Dickinson, is that in his case, Iron Maiden getting Bruce on board, it is the most successful example I can think of, at least in the world of rock and metal, of a new frontman, not only just breaking a band commercially, but also almost like recasting that band and creating the definitive version of what that band is, to the extent, like, to the level. And I take the point about Kiske and Helloween, but Helloween like aren't in the same league as Maiden, even on Killers, right?
That's
let alone
also what's obscuring your view, right? Is that very few bands are ever in the league of Iron Maiden in terms of scale and success.
Yeah.
So it's impossible to have a comparison point because in the context particularly of metal, like there are lots of examples where it has worked out, but metal is fundamentally not that big a commercial enterprise.
Well, yeah, but that begs the question.
I hate to keep bringing up Iced Earth, but obviously Iced Earth upgraded singers with Matt Barlow and then downgraded again later on, and then upgraded again with Matt Barlow.
But it does beg the question, Maiden weren't the only band in the 80s. I mean, Helloween changed their singer in the 80s. Other bands changed their singer in the 80s. Maiden just did it so much better, and it brought so much more commercial success than everyone else. You know what I mean? Like, it's not... There's no reason those other bands couldn't necessarily have risen to those heights.
I mean, I think Van Halen was bigger, even with Sammy Hagar.
With Hagar, yeah, to be fair. But the point is what I'm saying is Van Halen weren't starting at that level Maiden were. Like, Van Halen got a bit bigger, but they weren't going
right.
from
There's such a huge leap between Killers to Number of the Beast.
And that leap is what I'm thinking about. And also, I don't think most people are still thinking, oh, Sammy Hagar, that is the classic Van Halen lineup. I mean, some people prefer it, but if we're being honest, the classic Van Halen lineup is the David Lee Roth lineup,
totally.
Whereas Maiden not only massively expand their commercial appeal, they also essentially reinvent, like, this is, we're quite a well-established band, but now you've got the definitive version of us.
That is fair.
With 2 albums already in the tank, which is, to me, that is relatively unique. The only other comparison is potentially AC/DC, but I feel like AC/DC have the commercial success of Brian Johnson, but they never really recast him as like the classic AC/DC singer. Like, you know what I mean? AC/DC fans still think Bon Scott, like without a shadow of a doubt. No one's going, oh yeah, Brian Johnson's the classic AC/DC singer.
Yeah, although, and I say this as like an AC/DC layman, I guess. Whenever I picture AC/DC, it is with Brian Johnson.
Oh, quite possibly, yeah. But I think from the fans' point of view,
him with his little flat cap and curly curls.
Yeah, and I think there's also the difference that I think it's doubly risky for a band to change a singer. This sounds quite callous. If your original singer dies, you get a pass, right? Because it's like, well, there's not a lot you can do. They're dead. If you've actually, or even if your original singer leaves of their own volition, you get a pass. Or if in the case of Helloween, they decide, actually, I'm going to step back and just do this.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like Kai Hansen was booted out. He's still just writing everything and playing the guitars.
Well, exactly. Or, even in the case of, odd example, Genesis, right? Peter Gabriel decides he wants to go, okay?
Yeah.
He's not booted. When you boot your singer out and replace them, I feel like you are, in the eyes of your fans at least, doubly vulnerable.
Yeah.
Because...
You're Skid Row.
Well, yeah, because,
figuratively and literally.
And how did that work out for Skid Row? Because, Maiden have built up, they're not unknown enough to get away with it without anyone noticing, right? They've built up a significant fan base of people who only know Paul Di'Anno as the vocalist, and therefore presumably really like Paul Di'Anno. And then you have to turn around to those hundreds of thousands of people and go, oh yeah, we told him he had to go, and we've got this new guy. Oh, and by the way, the new guy's nothing like him.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, having not really come to any resolution whatsoever there, let's have a little look at Paul Bruce Dickinson, aka Bruce, aka Bruce Dickinson. So we'll do a quick flyby mini biography, because if you want to know more about Bruce Dickinson, just read What Does This Button Do? Really, it's good, isn't it? His autobiography.
That is a good book. He doesn't say very much about Iron Maiden, but he says an awful lot about flying planes.
There is a bit too much about flying planes, yeah, and an odd lack of anything about his family or private life. But that's.
I mean, he's completely excised them from his life in that book. It's very bizarre. But he, interviews at the time were kind of like, I wanted to maintain their privacy and I didn't want this to be like a gossipy biography. Yeah. But then it's also like, but you're married and had a couple of kids. Maybe they'd like a little nod
And
As a
subsequent
footnote.
developments in your private life present another possible reason why you wouldn't want to discuss
Yeah.
that in
Yeah.
as much detail, or indeed any detail. Anyway,
We'll leave that for the 21st
Yes.
century albums.
let's leave that hanging. Feel free to Google if you're not entirely sure what I'm talking about.
Oi!
So Bruce was born in Worksop, which I believe is in
Oh
Nottinghamshire.
god, how much of a biography is this
In the
got
Midlands.
to be?
We're gonna rattle through it quite quickly, okay? Because there are some
better.
things. There are parts of there is a certain mythology around Bruce Dickinson, isn't there? Right, and a lot of it stems from his
There is when you
upbringing.
read his Wikipedia page.
How, how dare you, Sam? I've read literally everything there is to know about Bruce Dickinson in every possible medium.
I think that's more depressing.
This next 5 minutes is the distillation of hours of reading and research. So he moves around a lot as a child during his childhood, and this I did want to touch upon this, including a spell as a boarder in a private school. Worth noting that a lot's made of this, the fact that Bruce Dickinson is super posh, but reading What Does This Button Do, he wasn't actually there a whole lot of time. He spent a lot of time in state schools. It seems his parents were, his dad in particular was like a wheeler dealer, bit of a wide boy. Sometimes the business was good, sometimes it tanked.
Yeah.
Hence they moved around a lot. But a lot's made of that, isn't it? But I thought to set the record straight. I mean, he spent a bit of time as a boarder in a private school
That he got expelled from.
that he got expelled from, and I think he always felt like a fish out of water there anyway.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Although he does, for whatever reason, relative to the rest of Iron Maiden, he comes across as a bit posher.
yeah, he
Maybe it's
does.
because he does lots of fencing.
Quite possibly, yeah. But he's also he's the only person in Iron Maiden who has a degree, as far as I'm aware, because he studied history at Queen Mary University in London, and that's relevant to the story. He got a 2-2, in case you're wondering, and that's relevant to the story because that's where he started, you know, singing with bands in a semi-professional way. Was whilst at university. Incidentally, there are quite a few Bruce Dickinson memes that do the round on Iron Maiden Facebook fan pages. And they're all really.
Of course, you're on the Iron Maiden Facebook fan
I don't know why. 'Cause
page.
they're so nauseatingly sycophantic. There's like a picture of Bruce, and it's just got a list of his achievements, and it'll be something like,
Ew.
"Did Justin Bieber become a pilot? Kind of
I mean, that's
present a radio
proper-
show, be
proper
a fencer."
Humor.
Oh, it
right
is.
there.
But one of them was like, "Did Justin Bieber become a professor of history?" I was like, "Sorry, whoa. Sorry, Bruce Dickinson, I'm not taking anything away from his achievement or any of his other achievements. He's very talented. But a 2-2 in history from Queen Mary's does not make you a professor of history.
Not
right?
that attitude.
Well, no, like, there aren't, I'm not saying there are many things I can do better than Bruce Dickinson, but I am more of a professor of history than Bruce Dickinson is.
Yeah, you literally have a PhD in history.
Yeah, but that does not make me a
But
professor
you
of
can't
history.
fly a plane or
No.
front Iron Maiden. So
Well, I've
trade-offs.
never tried either, so who knows?
I think one will end in death and the other will end in stage death.
Yeah. So picking up Bruce's stories at Queen
Sorry,
Mary
I'm just
University.
imagining you fronting Iron Maiden now. Hello.
Hello. Okay.
Scream for me, Swansea!
Hey, a white man came. So he's in Queen Mary University, playing in sort of student bands. His first professional experience, he answers an advertisement in the Melody Maker, and he ends up recording a track with a band called Shots, and the song's called Dracula. Shots basically never amount to anything. They play the club circuit in London, but like those weird accidents of fate, history, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
One night, Shots are playing in a pub to barely anyone in London, but who happens to be in the pub but the members of a band called Samson.
Dun dun dun.
Dun dun dun. Now, make Samson to be some pantomime villains. They're just a second-tier new wave of British heavy metal band. I'm sure they're fine.
They're behind you, Bruce.
But weirdly, Samson have somewhat faded into obscurity. Have you listened to any of the early Samson records?
No, and I was going to listen to Thunder March or whatever was the Ides of March.
Thunderburst, I think.
Thunderburst, that's it.
Yeah.
But then I decided not to and got on with my life.
I mean, they are like I like them in that way. I'm just interested in the new wave of British heavy metal and their nice curiosity sort of records. But it's hard. I don't quite get the hype that seemed to exist around Samson at the time.
Yeah.
They were generally considered frontrunners alongside Angel Witch, Iron Maiden, Def Leppard, Saxon, Samson. And to me, I think all those other bands are just musically so much better than Samson.
Right.
Samson, they got ahead of the curve because they got an album out in 79. So they were almost like a year It's like Samson and Saxon both got their first albums out in 79, so they
Right.
are like a little bit ahead of the pack, and that's the only explanation I can find. Because when you listen to the music, I just can't help but think, this is just quite inoffensive 70s rock. I
Yeah.
wouldn't call it metal, even new wave of British heavy metal. It's just kind of hard rock, really. Wouldn't have sounded out of place in 71 or 72.
But I mean, so much of like that first beginning crest of new wave of British heavy metal is kind of 70s rock.
Yeah, it is. But you know,
I mean,
there are
it's the
bands.
70s and it rocks. So.
Well, yeah, exactly. But there are bands who are
But yeah,
adding a bit more edge and bite and doing something a little bit different. I don't really, and that would be, I wouldn't mind so much if I thought the songs were particularly good, and they're just. I mean, I say this if I don't like them. I do like those albums, but objectively they're fine, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Bruce goes on to record 2 albums of Samson. So Head On in 1980, Shock Tactics in 1981. Weirdly, he's also the first Samson album, Street Survivors, just Survivors, sorry, has an illustrated picture of the band, including an illustration of Bruce Dickinson,
Yeah.
despite the fact he doesn't sing on that record.
Huh.
Paul Sampson, the guitar player, sings on the album, which if I was Bruce Dickinson, I'd be quite annoyed about because Paul Sampson does not have a good voice.
But did he, when the album was recorded, was he part of Samson?
Well, he just joined, but they'd already recorded the album.
Right, exactly. So whilst it's weird, I assume they probably didn't have the budget to go in and recut the vocal tracks.
Yeah, exactly. So
And that kind of thing happens much more than like you'd expect. The amount
Yeah.
of bands that it usually tends to be with a guitarist or bassist though. But the amount of bands that record an album and then recruit a missing member, and the missing member arrives in time for the artwork but not in time for the recording because lead times screw everything up.
well, yeah. It's presumably exactly one of those things, isn't it? It's just slightly weird to be like, oh, there's the
Yeah,
singer. Oh, he's
yeah.
not there. But it's whilst being in Samson that Bruce first comes into contact with Iron Maiden. Interestingly, he says he hadn't listened to their debut album, but Maiden were opening for Samson. They did several times. And again, there's a
Do
lot.
you think that's a lie?
Given what he goes on to say, I don't think so.
Okay.
And actually, it may have been the case. Maybe Maiden's album wasn't out yet, or he'd not listened to Soundhouse tapes. Because Bruce remembers Iron Maiden opening for Samson,
Yeah.
and vividly watching from the crowd. Again, this all sounds a little bit with the benefit of hindsight, but Bruce has recounted the story several times. He saw Maiden, and he thought, "Wow, I want to sing for that band.
Yeah.
I have to sing for that band. I will sing for that band." And he also says they reminded him of Deep Purple, who were like his favourite band. And I'm sure there's a little bit of that. It's all quite convenient, isn't it?
Yeah. But there's probably a nugget of truth in there. It's just after telling that story year after year, decade after decade, it grows into
Yeah.
something a bit more.
And having said
whimsical.
that, if I was the singer in Samson, given the material you had to work with, I would also.
I'm going to sing in any other band.
I would also hear Phantom of the Opera and go, yeah, that sounds a lot better than anything.
Who needs a singer?
Than anything
Angel Witch,
we've
how
got.
about you?
So, bringing it back round to Maiden, so Paul Di'Anno is on the way out. The chronology of this is a bit hazy. I'm pretty sure Paul does not know he's on the way out when Bruce is approached.
Ooh.
I'm pretty sure it's like
Ooh, it's like the overlap of relationships.
yeah, it's
Icky.
it's close, but I'm pretty certain that Paul doesn't know he's on the way out yet. He may well strongly suspect it. But Bruce is actually approached by Rod Smallwood to audition for Maiden at the Reading Festival in 1981. Samson are playing sort of middle of the bill. Reading Festival 1981. I don't even believe Maiden were playing that year. I think Rod
Yeah.
was specifically there to
Find
sound
Bruce,
out
to track him.
exactly to sound out Bruce Dickinson. And it was Steve who was the one who was really pushing for Bruce Dickinson.
Ah.
Which is interesting given the tension that would go on to characterize. It's the tension between
yeah.
Bruce and Steve that is so much the driving force by Maiden. But it was Steve's decision, and Rod was apparently initially unconvinced as by Bruce as a choice.
That's interesting.
Particularly when Rod explains it, he sort of said, "I didn't like that white thing that Bruce used to wear when he was in Samson." It's quite a vain. I'm sure you can get different clothes. That's fine.
Yeah.
And there was some.
They're clothes. They're changeable.
There was
Rod.
it's not sewn onto him. He can put something else on. And there was
I
some
didn't like that white thing. His skin.
and there was some kind of petty, like low level aggro tension between Samson and Maiden historically. So
Right.
Rod wasn't convinced, but Steve was like, "No, just sound him out." And Bruce makes it immediately clear to Rod that he's not going to be a Paul Di'Anno clone. He says, that Cockney Sparrow stuff Paul did, it just wasn't me. You're from London. What the hell is a Cockney Sparrow? Is that a phrase?
I'm not from 80s East End London. I've
just got this image of like Paul Di'Anno, like sort of pearly queen, like eating eels and mash, being like, all right.
Just
I'm a
Paul
Cockney
Di'Anno.
Sparrow.
You remember in Mary Poppins, the Cockneys and that wearing those like sort of bejeweled black coats and hats. Imagine Paul Di'Anno wearing that instead of a leather jacket, and then just saying supercalifragilisticexpialidocious a lot.
But yeah, Bruce wasn't going to do that. We made that quite clear.
I'm not going to be a Mary Poppins Dick Van Dyke.
Hasn't got the job yet, right? He's just being asked to audition, but he's already saying, giving his terms and conditions. Bruce went on to say his memory of the conversation was, he said, first of all, you know I'll get the job or you wouldn't ask.
That's pretty conceited.
It's quite conceited, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, at that point,
it is also probably quite accurate.
Yeah, I can hear like a 22-year-old Bruce Dickinson saying that. When I do get the job, he says, and I will, are you prepared for a totally different style and opinions and someone who's not going to roll over? If you don't want that, tell me now and I'll walk away. At this point,
is to Rod.
Yeah. I was about to say, if I was Rod at this point, I would just go, fuck off.
Nah, mate, you're not worth the trouble.
It says a lot about Rod's patience and clearly the talent he saw in Bruce, that at this point he doesn't just go back to Steve and go, mate,
the guy's an arse.
He's so hard work. Like, you don't want to, like, give Terry Slasser a call again. We'll get him back in the band. But so there's a rehearsal with the band takes place soon after, and it seems that after that rehearsal, Bruce is off the job on the spot. Incidentally, those rehearsal tapes are out there in the internet now. They're quite kind of interesting listens. Yeah, there's a few things that I think, particularly there's a version of Twilight Zone from those.
Yeah,
we may well have discussed this last episode actually, but I think Bruce sounds really good, and he sings the Paul stuff amazingly. I don't necessarily prefer it to Paul's takes, in all honesty, a lot of the time. But there's some stuff, that Twilight Zone version, I'm like, wow, yeah, he does sound really good. And he's undisputably an incredible vocalist, isn't he? Mick Wall makes the point in the Iron Maiden biography, which he might make, since I presume Maiden paid him to write it. But he says that Bruce Dickinson...
So no bias.
Yeah, he says Bruce Dickinson is, probably, at that point was the greatest British rock singer since the likes of Plant, Gillan.
Yeah.
And he's right, isn't he?
Yeah, I think he's probably right. In the annals of rock and metal singers in Britain, like, Bruce still is one of the greatest. And... yeah, it's interesting though, having listened to those tapes, those audition tapes, I think he sounds good, but he doesn't, partially because of the material, he doesn't sound like at his full potential. Obviously, they're just rough audition tapes anyway, but also the material isn't written for his voice, and that's part of what makes Number of the Beast so fantastic, is that the combination of the material tweaked to fit his vocal stylings and his vocals combined makes it magical.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And amongst his Nwabum peers, like I said, those Samson albums, they're interesting curios. I quite like them. Musically, if I'm being honest, they're quite remarkable. The thing that is remarkable is Bruce's voice, because he is better than any other new wave British heavy metal singer, isn't he, really?
Yeah, I think that's indisputable.
Joe Elliott is a very good singer. I
love Joe Elliott's voice, but he's not technically anywhere near Bruce Dickinson in terms of like power and range.
Sean Harris of Diamond Head, people said is good, but I don't think he's a patch on Bruce. Good singer, but not a patch on Bruce. Jesse Cox of Jaguar, again, Metallica liked him enough to ask him to audition, but, not a patch.
Really?
Yeah. Look it up, Sam.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Not right now. Don't be rude. I'm about to tell you something. But Metallica did want to fly Jesse Cox to America to be their singer. A singer of Jaguar, I think Tigers Pantang.
Wow.
Yeah, so rehearsal clearly goes well, and, the evidence is there for us all here. So he ends up playing his first UK concert of the band at the Rainbow, but he actually warms up. They basically seem to quite hastily book a run of 5 concerts in Italy, seemingly just to go somewhere that was a bit out of the gaze of the UK media, and
Yeah.
where they'd be able to give him an opportunity to warm up before taking him back onto home turf in the UK. And so he makes his debut with the band at the Rainbow in November. And as we previously saw, 2 new songs are debuted: 22 Acacia Avenue, Children of the Damned. According to Adrian Smith, he just came on stage and sang like he'd been in the band since day one. Although there were a few Bring Back Paul hecklers, people there the night.
Well, so I remember, I honestly can't remember where I read this, but there were quite a few people who compared Bruce Dickinson to, like, derogatively to an air raid siren, and saying, like, Iron Maiden's kind of lost its grit. You've just got this, like, horrible ambulance noise for a vocalist instead. I mean, yeah, he does sound a bit like an air raid siren, but that kind of punches everything up.
Beautiful melodic air raid siren.
Great. So these debut live gigs, are they pre-recording anything for the album?
Yes, they're not in the studio yet.
Okay.
But they clearly are writing, because they've got new stuff to debut. And before we get into the actual recording, which is, incredibly quick given the, we had a lot of things to say about the recording of Killers. Like, recording of Number of the Beast seems relatively straightforward. But before they go into the studio, they finish the year 23rd of December, a secret show at the Ruskin Arms. Also
Nice.
Dave Murray's birthday. I believe they
Aw.
performed under the name Genghis Khan, so it's not that secret, is it? Come on. Genghis
mean-
Khan playing the Ruskin Arms. I wonder who that could be.
Could be worse. Could be Ed in the Heads, right?
Yeah.
Like-
I think other than that show being like a sort of secret show and a birthday gig, that's always fun. The interesting thing about it for me is that they debuted another 3 new songs on that night.
And Paul was in the audience.
You know what? Put that down as Pedant's Corner. I think he was.
Really?
Yeah, I think he came along. I seem to remember
Oh,
reading that
that's awkward.
somewhere. But no, I think he was quite happy. I think he was invited.
okay.
Yeah. So I mean, that split was quite amicable. But they debuted 3 new songs: Hallowed Be Thy Name, The Prisoner, and Run to the Hills.
Wow.
Imagine being at that gig in a pub. The first
Yeah.
time you hear Hallowed Be Thy Name, and it's in a pub with probably no more than 150 people.
Strong.
Jeez.
Strong.
Right, let's quickly go through the recording of the album then, because, like I said, it seems it's a fairly uneventful recording. The main difference, I think, because so much of these ingredients are already in place now, they're back with Martin Birch, they've worked with him before,
Yeah.
they're back at Battery Studio again, they've worked there before. The main difference is that, unlike Killers, they literally have no material.
Yeah. So I was going to ask, coming into this recording session, everything is completely fresh. Like,
Yeah.
nothing is gleaned from the archives of.
Nope. No, well, other than one thing that we will get to, but interestingly, it's not a Steve composition.
Okay.
So, we'll get to Adrian Smith's contributions to the album,
Okay.
but, Adrian Smith is borrowing a couple of things from his past, but everything else is fresh. So I think in that window they have after getting Bruce, so Reading Festival is usually in August, isn't it? It's always the August bank holiday weekend. And then they're on the road, well, they do those warm-up shows in November. That in-between period, they've got a bit of time to write.
Right.
And so they've basically got 3 months to write the entire album.
Wow.
And Bruce is actually, even though you've got Bruce Dickinson, he's a good songwriter in his own right, he's unable to contribute anything because he's tied up in all this legal wrangling from the fallout of Samson.
Right.
So Samson were in legal financial difficulties anyway. Long, not particularly interesting story, but part of the reason Bruce wanted out of the band in the first place was this awful situation in the record company. So Bruce is unable to legally contribute stuff.
But does that just mean Bruce is unable to be credited?
Yes. Well, yeah, when we get to the track by track, since then Bruce has been a bit more candid.
I write that.
Yeah.
I write that.
Yeah, that was me. Yeah. All me.
Steve Harris, never heard of him.
So they have that writing block and they've just got to get everything new, nothing really left over. And then they're back in Battery Studios, 5 weeks. That's all they've got. The general consensus amongst the band was that 5 weeks to record the whole album felt very rushed.
Yeah.
And they basically had to plead with Rod Smallwood to give Martin Birch the time to mix it properly. Because Rod was like, no, it's done. We need to get this out. But Steve put his foot down and said, no, look, this needs a decent mix.
Yeah.
But as a result, the album comes out 22nd of March 1982, which is 2 days after their UK tour finishes.
Oy.
And they're actually playing most of the new album live that no one's ever heard at this point.
That is a bit awkward.
I guess they've heard the Run to the Hills single, but
Yeah.
yeah, which
But
we'll
then
get
imagine
into.
if that album had come out and the mix was rubbish.
Yeah, well, exactly, and I think Steve, that's the
It's
right
the right
call, isn't
call.
it? Yeah, and also for those people, they presumably didn't know it at the time, but you're hearing all those songs before they've ever been committed to vinyl. Incredible. But yeah, it seems, and I think that this will become the case going forward a lot now, even with a new vocalist, Maiden are constantly up against the clock because they work so hard and they work so hard. They're beginning to find a routine of doing things, aren't they? Martin Birch behind the controls.
Rod Smallwood has a 3-line whip.
They're cracking the whip, just driving
on,
everyone.
Make some metal. Make it now. Tour. Make some metal.
Yeah.
Tour.
I need a product, damn it. Sell the product.
Make t-shirts.
And hence we get Number of the Beast, quick from writing to recording, everything rushed, but it stands up. So we'll get into the tracks next episode. Do you want to quickly finish part 1 with a little roundup of the artwork?
Yeah, let's talk about the artwork. I mean, we kind of touched on it in the previous episode, but obviously this artwork was originally produced for the Purgatory single, and Rod Smallwood made Derek Riggs hold it back, saying it's too good for a single artwork. And yeah, it is, as far as I'm concerned, if it's not the most iconic piece of Iron Maiden artwork, it's top 3.
I would, yeah. And
I'd say the only thing that might be more iconic is the Trooper artwork.
yeah, and I would say if you're looking at metal album artwork in general, not even comparing it against Iron Maiden's other releases, I think Number of the Beast is as iconic as Master of Puppets, Rain and Blood.
Absolutely.
It is just, definitely a good call by Rod to hold that back.
Yeah,
it's interesting that he saw the potential of that, being like, oh no, hang on, that's too good for a single.
It's also interesting, like, he saw the potential of that, and for whatever reason, thematically, it really works with the album title of Number of the Beast, but obviously he didn't know they'd be writing a song called The Number of the Beast. There's a lot of serendipity in how everything lines up for the creative direction of that album. Like you said, the recruitment of Bruce seems to have gone quite smoothly. The recording actually, although it is very crunched, seems to go quite smoothly. And yeah, similarly with the artwork, it's just the right artwork for the right album.
Agreed. A little bit of nerdy trivia. The original vinyl obviously has the blue sky, which is the misprint, and the band wanted the dark sky you get in the remaster. Personally, I know it's not what the band wanted, I quite like the blue sky.
Yeah, but it's a bit
incongruous.
Yeah, it's a bit Sega 80s arcade game.
Yeah.
Rather than
but I quite like
it's
it.
not Outrun.
No, but it's just I don't know. I quite like this sort of bright, the sort of slightly day-glow
kind
kind
it's
of.
meant to be like
I know it is. I know it is.
Or
I
something
know.
bad.
Yeah, but I don't mind it. It's good.
Yeah.
Obviously, the artwork was going to. Well, it became iconic, but also was one of the things that came to giving the band a lot of grief in the USA. But I guess should we hold that thought for
we can hold that thought for
another
next
time.
So yeah, that feels like a natural point to end this week's episode. Obviously, next week we'll talk about the actual album itself, how it's received, and some of the fallout that comes with that. But until then, if you have any strong opinions about what we've said, contact us on the Twitter at, what's the Twitter, Blevin?
At Maidenpod.
Thank you.
And don't forget the email.
Don't email us. I will not respond to the email.
Maidenvoyagerspodcast@gmail.com.
It's not 1999.
Some people like long-form writing, Sam.
Anyway, on that upsetting note, please don't send us long-form letters. We'll see you next time.
Cheerio.
Bye.